Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast and website by, for, and about baby boomers. So last week we talked about breaking our big goals down into little steps, even to the point of how to plan things out for your day. And that's all well and good. But this week we're going to talk about what to do when your plans and goals just get totally disrupted. And so let's get started. But first, I almost made it on time tonight talking about getting disrupted. And suddenly my browser decided to crash. And so that's what I use. I use StreamYard. It's a browser-based program. And so it's funny, as I was sitting there trying to resurrect all the technology, I'm thinking, so even when we talk about what to do when our goals get totally disrupted, things happen unexpectedly. So that's really something that happens all the time in life. And so that's going to happen too with our goals, no matter how much we try and plan them and work carefully on them. So I hope you enjoy this evening. So first, the real tiny recap. We over the past couple of weeks, we talked about that we had one big goal for the year. Then we had quarterly goals to support that goal, and maybe smaller goals of things we wanted to do each quarter. Then we had the top items for the week, and those were things to help get us through the month and to reach the quarter. And finally, probably no more than 3 things each day that we really wanted to get done. So we had this whole hierarchy of things, and that all sounds great in the abstract. Of course it does. We just march right along. We knock down our goals one after the other, and every day things move more or less steadily forward towards our one big goal. At the end of the year, we celebrate all our victories. If only life worked like that, and as we imagined it. We all know about disruptions, obviously. Let's say for something like a pandemic that rolled through town, changing so many aspects of our lives and society in ways we never would have believed possible just a few years ago. Even things like in the day job for me, I work for a very staid and we'll just leave it at that, staid Austrian company. And working from home was something that they just absolutely, completely, totally disagreed with. And just extremely. People had requested it, people who lived from the offices and stuff, and it was always turned down. The pandemic happened, and now they are actually closing offices and have sublet some of our office space because they realize that people actually are fully accountable. They will work reliably from home, and we still get a lot of stuff done. And to their point, there is some merit to getting together. Working remotely isn't the perfect answer to everything, but the difference in actually was probably 12 months, maybe even less, from when they went to, well, we can work from home only as long as the pandemic is going on, to, okay, for a large group of people, if you don't have to be here, you can just continue to work from home. It was really 100% turnaround in their attitude. And that's just gone all across society. So people like, say WeWork, who had a whole premise based upon all these people coming to the office, they've had to retool what they're doing. And it's very interesting. And they've done, a reasonably good job of it. And they've pitched, what they've changed is who they pitched their project to. So, that's why I'm saying, even great big corporations, all these people, all the way down to us, just individuals or maybe small business people, goals, situations always change. And so we have to learn how to roll with that and what to do with it and how to recover from it when it actually happens. Because, there's always things, there's weather happens, job changes, health, a lot of things come up that we just don't expect. And we have to be able to figure out how to handle that. So some of these, sorry, lost my place. I'm thinking of too many things at once, a common problem with me. So, one of the big things that came up, like the pandemic, those are pretty obvious. They really changed how a lot of people worked on things, but it also provided a lot of opportunities for people. And that's something that's really important to keep in mind, because a lot of businesses grew as a result of the pandemic. And there were a lot of hidden opportunities that showed up. And so even when things happen to you that you don't expect, it may have hidden opportunities in it. Even something like maybe a health change, which initially seems devastating, all of a sudden you realize you start doing things differently. You thought, well, I don't want that to happen again. And you realize, wow, now you're living a much healthier lifestyle, or maybe you had to pick a different career to support whatever changes. Wow, this new career is very satisfying, and it's something you wouldn't have tried if that change hadn't happened. So this isn't, some pie in the sky silver lining thing, but it really is. As life changes, you have to be able to adapt, because change is always happening in life, and it will happen to you, but there are certain things that happen, obviously, that just seem to be all downside, with no redeeming features whatsoever. And how do you handle those personally disruptive or even devastating setbacks to your heartfelt goals? The very first response, which is very easy to say, but is very difficult to do, is to stop focusing on that event or situation and remember all the other goals that you had. There were a lot of things that you had planned to do that weren't affected. Maybe your one big goal did get affected, but maybe that one big goal had a lot of ancillary goals that were still very important to you. All those goals still exist. Like I say, it's simple and trite to say, but it's very difficult to do. But if you can remember that, it's very rewarding because it gives you something to look forward to and to continue to follow and push towards. Even if the disruption was major, there's always, almost always many more things that were important to you. And those things were important to you yesterday. They're probably still important to you today. So that's the first thing, when you get a major life disruption. Then next, count on a friend, or, no friends are handy at the moment, talk to a counselor, join a community group, or call a hotline. Describe to them all the reasons you feel like your whole life and your goal stream just fell apart. And it's kind of like, well, that seems a little silly. Why am I going to sit and focus on the thing that really has me upset? And actually an ancillary thing to that is if no one's available, because talking, I think, is probably the best way to do it. But the next best thing is to carefully write, not type. I mean, take a pen, pencil, write it down on a piece of paper. Don't use a computer. And so why are we doing it, all that stuff in a kind of a manual way? Because when you actually sit down and focus on this and describe it to somebody else, and then go through or write it down as if somebody else were going to read it, then what happens is you activate a lot more of your brain. And that manual act of writing or thinking of the phraseology you want to say to somebody and saying it slowly and concisely so that they can understand the depth of your emotion. When you do that, your whole brain becomes involved, and it's not just the emotional centers of your brain. And because your emotional centers are the ones that are all hurting and have you in a panic. But when you get the whole part of your brain involved, what you'll find is very often what will happen is you'll start to come up with answers to your own situation. And the answer is within you already, but it's just so overwhelmed by all the intense emotional response. So when you take the time to write it down or take the time to talk to somebody, speak to somebody about it, what happens is you'll start to answer your own questions. You'll see, yes, you had this one thing that's very emotional, very disruptive, very devastating, but there are other things still going on, and your brain will help guide you to focusing on that. So let's say that kind of half worked, and you feel a little better, but you're still kind of fundamentally devastated by the whole situation. The next step, at least for me and for a number of people I know, is to do something, just do anything, something proactive so that your brain and yourself can experience a win of some sort. And, what sort of thing do you think, am I saying that should work on? Well, basically anything that you find positive, especially if it's something that you've been putting off or that you've missed doing. Maybe you're so busy working on your work goal that you haven't played golf or haven't gone for a hike in the woods or whatever it is that you like to do, and you just haven't done it for a while. Well, now here you are, you're all wound up. Go do it and experience all the things, all the joy that activity brings you. I know there will be emotions that creep into that. What we really want to do is just do something that you really enjoy doing. Go for a walk, even if it's raining. Make a pie. Eat the first slice. Don't wait to give it to somebody else. Do something to pamper yourself. If you couldn't sleep last night because you're all wound up, but you finally fell asleep at 4:00, turn the alarm off, sleep to 9:00, call into work and say, hey, I overslept. Do something to reward yourself and give yourself a win. And so, you finally get something done, and engaging your body will help your mind process all the emotions and disappointment. Your mind is a very complex thing. It's really very fascinating. If you give it nothing else to do, it will focus on the primary thing, which makes sense, right? Because it's there to focus on that which is important to you. And so if you're really upset about something and you focus on it and you see all the negative sides and all that stuff, that's what it's going to focus on. But if you also enjoy nature, like I do, say, then, and you go for a walk, your mind is also going to be, now it's going to be in the woods and saying, wow, it actually, smells and sounds really pretty in the woods today, or the snow looks really nice, or, oh, look at that. There's, some people, I thought I saw them last week. And there's all these thoughts to come along. And part of it is the act of walking and paying attention to where you're walking or doing something, playing tennis, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. Your brain now becomes more involved. And what that does is it frees up the emotional centers to start to work through all the disappointment and trauma that you had. And it's a really important piece. There are envisioning techniques that I am not trained in, but certainly I'm familiar with, that take that to a very specific methodology. And I'll look it up and provide that information next week or in the comments. But the point or the trick of it is getting the brain out of the rut and to start thinking of other things at the same time. And just that will suddenly start to release a lot of that stress. The goal is still missed. The goal is going to have to change. All that's there. But when you free up that space in your brain, now it gives them more time to come up with a solution. And you'll see, oh, I'm going to miss that goal, but here are some other things that are also important to me. Now, if you really, let me just put something up right here. Where did it go? There we go. No, that's not the one. It stole my banner. Let me try that again. Is it still there? It is. There we go. Okay. So that's the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So I want to say, remind you right here and now that if you're truly overwhelmed and feeling there's no reason to continue life, please call the suicide hotline, call a counseling professional, go to the hospital, call a dear friend, whatever it is, but seek help immediately. And we love to have you here. We want to keep you coming back. And even though I just gave you some real simple tips and tricks to reduce the stress, it's easy to get caught up in the present emotion and forget all the good things in life. So, just again, call a number like this, call 911, call anybody, and just have a chat with the operator. Personally, I've been involved, or I've had to call 911 on behalf of somebody else, and they happen to be located on the other side of the country. And so I called my local 911. Actually, I was having somebody help me so I could keep the other person on the phone. So call the local 911, explain the situation. They patched us through to the 911 on the other side of the country, explained the situation to them, and within about 6 minutes, somebody was at that person's door. They really do want to support you. So, it's something like, oh, I'd feel silly doing that or whatever. Don't. They come across situations like that all the time, and they're really there to support you and help you. So I'm going through some simple ways to get over major disappointments. But if it's a really major disappointment, you're having trouble getting past it, there's no embarrassment. There's nothing bad about it. Call a suicide line, call 911, call whatever, call anyone, and start talking to them. Talking to them releases that emotion. And if you're still not getting through it, they'll get somebody out to help you. And they really do want to support you through all that stuff. So please, the things I'm talking about are good for little traumas. If you have a really major trauma and you want to talk to somebody, don't hesitate, just do it. So, let's move back a little bit and say we've gotten to the point, we've talked ourselves into the point where things are just kind of going poorly. So, you feel a little bit better, but the reality is that your goals are a wreck and you've lost all your motivation. Well, why is that? Well, it might be because things that you really held dear, maybe the relationship you had envisioned, it's the center of your life, the ability to live in foreign lands, the ability to start a business that you wanted to, the, whatever it is that you wanted to go out and do something fantastic and learn how to kayak the river. And now you found that you can't be in water for whatever medical reason. Whatever happened in your goals suddenly got totally challenged and just completely decimated. Now, the difficult part or the challenging part is to remember that what happened only changed one instance in your life. It only changed one part of that lifelong goal. And it may still be attainable, but it may be attainable in a different form. Equally important, just like I said before, if you say no to something, it allows you to say yes to something else. That change, the change in your life, the goal that seemed to have gone away, may open up even greater opportunities that you otherwise may have never envisioned or may have completely missed. And at the same time, it's also a really good time to re-examine your goal or your goals. If a single change, no matter how significant it is at the instant, but if a single change can completely disrupt your goal or your goals, was it really a robust or realistic goal? right? This is especially true if your goals are centered around a personal relationship. Relationships pretty much by definition, involve more than one person, right? But what can you control? At best, you can only control yourself and your response to external situations. So, to put it, kind of do a little uh, illustration of that, it's kind of like having a picnic, but your goal is to have a nice sunny day. Well, unless you're a pretty unusual person, you probably can't control the weather. So having the goal be good weather is probably not a robust goal. A better goal might be something like to have a wonderful and fun picnic with contingencies in case the weather turns rainy or unpleasant or whatever you want, right? Big difference. In one case, I mean, superficially, when you look at it quickly, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a nice picnic. It's going to be a wonderful picnic. It's going to be a beautiful day, and we're all going to have a great time. Okay, that's fine, but now you're dependent upon the weather because that was part of your goal. If your goal is to have a nice picnic and have lots of fun together, then you can plan around that and say, well, but if the weather's not nice, here's a whole bunch of other fun things we can do and maybe have an even better time. That's the really important aspect of going back and reevaluating your goals. So very quickly, from the past couple of sessions, remember we talked about what SMART goals were, right? Those are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they are relevant, or they're reach goals. Reach goals mean you have to stretch a little bit to get to them, and they're time-based. In other words, they have a deadline. You're going to do something by some time, right? So that brings us all the way back to the beginning. What to do when our goals seem to be completely run off the track? Well, once we get calmed down, we get our emotions a little bit under control, and in seeking help if it seems appropriate, we finally get to the point where we can look at the situation a little more logically and objectively, right? That's a good time to look back at the goals that got disrupted and see if they really were SMART goals or just a concept. So if it's a concept or an emotional goal, like I want to be happy, right? That's not a good goal. It's a great state to be in, but it's really hard to attain because you can't really define what happy is, on an ongoing basis. I'm happy today because I got chocolate ice cream. Does that mean every time I see chocolate ice cream, I'm happy? Maybe for the rest of my life. Seems unlikely. So, you have to define your goal. So now this gives us our opportunity to rebuild our goal, remembering and honoring the original goal, but separating out any emotions and concepts into kind of this separate bin and focusing on a goal that we can really define, we can achieve, and we can recognize we can attain it. It can still support our original goal and should in most cases. But we have to remember it isn't reasonable to have a goal that's exclusively dependent upon another person or overly dependent upon factors we cannot control. So, probably some of you might be saying, well, I have business goals, I have a business. I need the economy to survive. So things are going to change. So, of course, that's out of my control, right? Well, yes, but only up to a point. Right. Remember during the pandemic, many restaurants and food establishments had to completely reinvent themselves during the pandemic, right? They all went to takeout establishments, very fancy restaurants and things like that. In New York, a lot of the bars here, they allowed serving liquor on the streets, which is something, except for like in New Orleans, you just don't see in most places. Well, it kind of realized, when you actually do it with some planning and some controls, it didn't turn into a huge drunken foray everywhere. That, it allowed people to stay open and make money and keep people employed when otherwise they couldn't have been. And so, some restaurants succeeded, some did not. But in every case, the owners had control of their own destiny. And that's really important. Some defined their businesses just as sit-down restaurants. And, those people generally didn't do well, but that was their choice. But even some of those were able to kind of get through it by kind of going into hibernation. And they survived that way. So the important part of any goal is that you must have some control over the actions and over the situations that will allow you to attain that goal. This isn't a guarantee that you're going to reach your goal, but it gives you the best chance available to really reach the significant goals in your life and to really get to the point of doing what you want to do. So I know that was kind of a lot to cover, and there'll probably be questions, but we may revisit the topic because it's really an important one. Goals are great when you reach them, but it's also one of the big things is learning how to learn from failure and to be resilient is another very important skill. It's wonderful to have goals, but you also have to remember that a goal isn't a single point in time or in the universe. A goal is a target. And so sometimes you'll reach a goal, sometimes you blow through your goal and things are wonderful. Sometimes you don't quite reach your goal. You have to celebrate that success. And sometimes your goals just get blown out of the water by things beyond your control, or just things that maybe should have been in your control and you didn't pay attention to it and they got out of your control. In all those cases, it's time to step back, try and separate out the emotion, get calmed down, do the little steps we talked about, do something physical, get out of your head, write it down, talk to somebody about it. And then from there, look at that goal, look at it logically and objectively, and then rebuild it into something that you really want it to be. So that's it for the week. Thank you so very much for stopping by. If you found something interesting or useful, please pass it along. If you didn't, drop me a comment. Let me know what you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Thanks for visiting. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone, and see you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.